more important question that I ask all the time, I ask my kids all the time, and I ask other people all the time. It's not, what do you want to be when you grow up? It is, what kind of life do you want to build? What do you want your life to look like when you grow up?
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice. Please consult a professional advisor before making decisions based on what you hear on this show.
Welcome to that Wall Street Tribe. So glad to have our friend Daniel Espy back in the studio. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you very much. I think it's my third time on the podcast.
Sir.
Yeah, well, you've done something right. Before I get to you, though, Stallion, I got a question for you. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I'm not sure what this has to do with the show. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. What about you?
I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. Daniel, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think that's a very good question, so I'm not going to answer it.
Yes, sir.
However, I'll give you a story to illustrate the question you're getting at. About 10 years ago, I found myself sitting in my office. There was a young man who had come in, a young man about 10 years, my junior, who I had been mentoring and discipling for the last several years. And he came in and you could just tell he was heavy hearted. You could tell he was distraught. There was a lot on his mind. Now, knowing this guy, this was really out of character for him because everything in this guy's life was wonderful. I mean, he was a really good looking guy. He had a beautiful wife. He had 3 small kids that he loved and adored, and they loved and adored him. He had a very good 6-figure job. This was over 10 years ago. And he loved his work. He loved everything that he was doing, but yet he was completely miserable. And the root of his misery in this situation was he was having to spend an hour commuting to work each way every day. And he was having to work 8 to 10 hours a day. And in that moment, this light bulb went off in my head that I had been kind of boiling in the background that really kind of made me upset at that the people who had raised me, the people who had just kind of guided me through life, because people had always asked me this question growing up, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I actually ended up choosing being a golf course superintendent. And I did it because I love that job. I love playing golf, but yet that job had found me working 12 days on, 2 days off, 12 to 14 hours a day in the hot Texas sun. And what I realized growing up that no one ever told me, and that's what this guy was facing in this moment, was that time is the most valuable thing in the world. That as you get older, the one thing you want is time. But not just time for the sake of having time. You want to be autonomous with your time. You actually want to be able to choose what you do with your time. And so what I've learned over the years, and a conversation that I have with young people that I still disciple, have with my children all the time, is there actually is a high cost to getting the right answer to the wrong question. That guy, that young man, his whole life had been asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he had wanted this career in videography and photography, and it paid him incredibly well. But no one ever asked him what I think is a better question, a more important question that I ask all the time. I ask my kids all the time, and I ask other people all the time. It's not, what do you want to be when you grow up? It is, what kind of life do you want to build? What do you want your life to look like when you grow up?
If you've listened to our show for any length of time, you've heard us talk about infinite banking and how we were able to use that concept to create over $50,000 a month in passive income. But it's just not that easy to figure out, how does this all connect into my own personal system?
Stallion, that's why we created the passive income operating system, bro. It shows you how to turn active income into passive income. It makes all the steps come together. If you would like to get access to it as a podcast listener, we've never given this away in public before, go to what'swhatwallstreet.com/PIOS. Do you think that maybe it's so hard for young people to do that? I can remember talking to
dental students. My wife was a dentist, as you know, and I would go up there and speak to third and fourth year dental students, and we'd be talking about the future. I would be trying to talk to them about the future. Like, how are you going to build passive income? How are you going to, create this life that you want to live? And the only thing they wanted to do was go put their fingers in people's mouths and start getting paid to do it. Right. Like, I mean, they were just trained to move from one thing to the next. They never realized how little time that they were going to have in the future. Do you think it's harder for young people to make that decision, or you still think there's a way to do it? And if so, tell me how you're penetrating those young minds.
Well, I've had a lot of experience over the last few years because after being a golf course superintendent with the total change of life circumstances, I actually ended up being a missionary in Africa, went to seminary and got a master's degree in Bible, went and planted a church in Seattle. But the last 6 years, we've been down at the University of Florida, volunteering our time as a pastor and an elder as a church as we run our businesses. And so I've had a lot of time to mentor a lot of 18 to 26-year-olds over the last 6 years. And all of them are in this same situation that we found ourselves in, that the one that you just described, right? I mean, I had aspiring doctors and lawyers and, engineers in my church, in my home all the time, PhD students. And this is that thing. Their whole life, they have been taught to pursue something that they love, first and foremost. That's the first thing they're all told, right? Now, high achievers find a way to turn that into money. But with seeing so many young doctors and so many young lawyers, we saw it all the time. By chasing money, by chasing purpose, they never considered time. So we reframed the question and just kept challenging them with this question of, what do you want your life to be? And so right now I'm in the throes of it, right? Because I have 4 kids, 13, 15, 17, and 19. And it just so happens that my 19-year-old, who's going to school online, getting a business degree, working part-time for me in one of my companies, he is actually pursuing marriage, way younger than I did. But he met a young lady a couple years ago, and our families are all in on this conversation of them getting married and what this might look like. So this is a regular conversation I'm having in my house right now.
Well, I tell you what, first of all, hats off to you that you would purposely put yourself in the way of mentoring 18 to 26-year-olds for the last 6 years. There's not anything in that actually interests me. But I'm grateful that you did and that you're able to share with us some of these insights, because I think the listeners of this show are, many of them, in the same position that you are. And it feels a little bit difficult to have these kind of conversations with our kids, because, to be honest, and I don't know if it's just me, but maybe you can share a little bit from your experience. How realistic are they at 18 and 19 about understanding all these things that you're talking about? Like, what experience have they had other than the one they grew up with that actually would give them context of how to even answer those questions?
Oh, I mean, it's so funny you asked that. There was a young man in my church, and he knew that I was doing well in business, and he actually had some money. Let's put it this way. This guy was so smart. Like, they were paying him to go to school academically. That's how smart this kid is, right? I mean, came from another state. He's getting paid tens of thousands a year to go to school, undergrad. That's how smart this kid was, right? So he's like, I got all this extra money. Like, I want to give, I want to be generous. Like, what should I start doing with it, right? And so we just started talking about money. And, okay, this is what you could do with your money. Tell me how much you have. Tell me what your plan is. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, I mean, not what you want to be, but like, what do you want your life to look like? Are you going to get married? Yeah, I'm going to get married. Okay. Well, how many kids do you want to have? Okay. I want to have 3 kids. Okay. Where do you want to live? This is in Florida. He lived nearish the beach. That's where he wanted to be near his parents. And I'm like, so how much money do you think a year it takes to have that kind of lifestyle? And he's like, oh, I think I only need to make like 55, 60 grand a year. And I was like, okay, well, can we pencil that out real fast? Like, so, and this is when interest rates were still like around 4%. So we're like, okay, so let's say you get a house in this town. Let's just say $500,000 because you're kind of near the beach. You're going to have a hard time getting a house less than $500,000. Let's pencil that out. Well, that easily penciled out, to $3,000 a month just for mortgage and interest, right? And then we went over there and we said, okay, well, you got $500 for bills because you're going to have electricity and water and all these things. You've told me you want to give. So let's say you make 60 grand a year and that giving's 10%. Well, now you're at $600 a month there. We haven't even talked about cars yet. We haven't even talked about groceries yet. And you think you can make it off 60 grand a year? And he's like, oh, well, I just thought if I went to school and got a good job, I would just be able to afford all these things. And again, this is a kid who came from a great family. He came from a family who was doing well, but no one had ever had this conversation with him, and he had never counted the cost. And a second story along those lines, my first year in Florida, I had basically said in kind of a group question and answer time after church one time where they were interviewing the adults in the room, I had said, if you should not consider any job that paid less than $80,000 a year if you planned on getting married and having a family. Now, this was in 2018, right? All the way before pre-COVID. And I saw one of those guys 5 years later at a wedding, and he came up to me and he goes, hey, you know what? I remember one time you said this thing that a person needed to make 70 to 80 grand a year. Do you still stand by that? And I was like, no, not at all. And he's like, good, because that's the most ridiculous thing. I don't think I've ever heard somebody say, you telling somebody if they need to make that much money. I said, I don't stand beside it because I think I was wrong. I said, because I think now the number is $125,000 a year. And he was really blown away at that point.
What do you think, Daniel, that they're missing by not understanding that there are three pieces to this stool, that they need to focus on more than just purpose or just the money, right? Like you're saying time, but there's people who pursue time. I had my college roommate, he told me, I don't know if this was real or he's just lazy and decided this was what he wanted to say that day. He said, I want to be one of those the rest area superintendents, I want to just sit in the back, watch TV, play video games, do whatever, he was going to have abundant amount of time. I had another friend that ended up becoming a maintenance supervisor over this gas plant, and he just sits around and watches movies all day and plays video games. And every once in a while, there's something he has to go do. And obviously he's trained to be able to do it, but he has all the time in the world. But I would imagine that's not very purposeful either. So why is it important to have all three?
Well, I mean, if you look at just human studies on happiness, you will see this three-legged stool of time, money, and purpose appear over and over and over again. If you guys have never checked it out, you can go into your favorite AI engine right now, and you can just put in the Harvard study on happiness. And it's the longest study ever done on human happiness. 85 years ago, they started the study. They've been running it for 85 years. They followed these people all throughout their life. They followed their kids, and it just keeps going and going and going. And, they've really found that when it comes to human happiness, there are some really key contributors. And these are things you've all heard before, right? And they're things like meaningful relationships, right? So we all know that our relationships have an incredible effect on our happiness, right? They talk about purpose and meaning. They talk about gratitude and mindset, that this idea about autonomy, right? A new study I actually read as I was prepping for this podcast just came out the other day and in a magazine, and I'll read the quote right here. It said, having a strong sense of controlling one's life is a more dependable predictor of positive feelings of well-being than any of the objective conditions of life we have considered. Autonomy has a larger and more consistent effect on well-being than money does. Money leads to autonomy, but it does not add to well-being or happiness, right? And so there's also things about growth, you growing as a person, But at the end of the day, if we really look at our lives and boil down our lives, if I have enough money that I can do what I want to with my time to live out my purpose, I'm going to be a happy individual. I mean, that I think is the happiest that a person can be if they have enough money to be able to be autonomous with their time, to live out their purpose and their dreams that they've set for themselves.
So speak to that, Daniel. The person that says, "Man, I don't know, Daniel. Life is short. I don't want to just go do something just to make money, so that eventually I get to do this whole purpose thing that you're talking about." I mean, I want to focus on what I'm passionate about today. Like, what do you say to that person or that teenager, hypothetically, that may be asking that question?
I mean, I would say, look, I admire you being a purpose-driven individual. Like, purpose is so good and so important, right? But purpose is not enough to sustain you. I mean, like as I was doing some research about social workers for this podcast, right? I learned that the average social worker, which, has a master's degree many times, so they've gone to school for at least 6 years. The average length that someone stays in social work is 8 years. And if you work with kids, it's 2 to 3 years. Now think about that. I mean, there's no higher purpose. I mean, what an incredible purpose to give your life for the well-being of other people. But yet, even as passionate as you are, you get smacked in the face with this reality that it sucks up all of your time, it doesn't pay much money, and you get burnt out. So though you may want to live for your purpose, and purpose is great, but it's not all there is to life. Just like money is not all there is to life, or having all the time you want is not all there is to life. I think it really is this three-legged stool that has to support the entire, the life that we want to live.
There was nothing worse than walking into class when you're in school and the teacher saying, "Pop quiz day." Why? Because you were unprepared. Are you unprepared, though, for financial freedom?
Don't be. Find out how close you are by taking our 30-second quiz at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/quiz.
Hey, Tribe, have you ever wondered how billionaires actually invest?
Because let's be honest, billionaires aren't following the same playbook as everyone else. They're not chasing that next hot stock or jumping in and out of the market.
No, they're thinking in decades, not quarters. They're focused on cash flow, not just net worth, and they're building legacy with every move that they make.
That's why we're excited to tell you about a podcast that we love. It's called Invest Like a Billionaire.
Yes, hosted by our friends Ben and Bob Frazier. They break down the exact strategies that ultra wealthy use, the family offices, the private equity firms, and institutions.
And they make it simple and actionable for people like us. Whether you're just starting your journey or looking to level up, this show gives you a backstage pass to billionaire-style investing.
All right, so go search Invest Like a Billionaire on your favorite podcast app and hit the subscribe button.
Daniel Tosh said, money can't buy happiness, but it can buy a jet ski. And then he asked the really, deep question. Have you ever seen someone sad on a jet ski? I think that's something you consider. And then another anonymous quote, I like this one, is happiness is free. It's the delivery fee that'll bankrupt you.
Well, Russ, I mean, just in light of what Daniel just said, the reason that we focus on passive income greater than monthly expenses being the true formula to financial freedom, it's also to what you're saying, Daniel, to the autonomy of your time. I often use the example when I'm talking to groups. I say, pull up your calendar right now on your app. Like, just pull up your phone, look at your calendar, and tell me how many of those little boxes you got to place on your calendar. Like, not somebody else. You didn't place it there because you had to, and someone else is requiring that time to be filled by you. The ones that you got to place there because that's what you wanted to do, the highest and best use of that time. That is the scorecard. When you pull up that calendar and you've been able to put those things in there, you've won. Like, you now can pursue as much of that purpose as you want. And I think that there may be even a conversation here of like, there's a seesaw effect. Like, if you're at the beginning of your career and you're like, man, I want to be all purpose all the time, but you're not going to make any money. Let's back off of that a little bit. Let's still do what you're passionate about doing, in reason within the timeframes that you have outside of the obligations of that work until you can flip-flop that and start to have all of your time to pursue that at the highest level. So there's so much that you're saying here, I think, that supports what we're talking about on the show day in and day out. But I love the framework of thinking about all three of those things simultaneously. Russ, what would you add to that?
Well, I just think like there's a level, when you look back at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's a very base level. People start out trying to figure out, how do I just have food and water, right? Basic sustenance. Then they're going to move up to figuring out what sort of home they want, and they get nicer homes, nicer cars, and so forth and so on, and seek relationships. And that tends to drive up all the cost of everything, right? I think that's been true in my life. But then once they have everything that they want, it's all about, how do I help others? Self-actualization. How to start achieving purpose? And that's the way that they've seen the world work. And clearly, when you have access to money, it gives you the ability to be a better giver, right? The best way to help the poor has always been said, don't become one of them, right? Like you create so that you can give. That's a good thing. So Daniel, for parents listening to you right now who have children who are trying to, instill wisdom into those teenagers or young 20s. And if you had to take this idea, this framework that you have and put it on a t-shirt for these students to remember, what would that t-shirt say in your opinion?
Again, it would just be asking that question. What kind of life do you want to live when you grow up, right? And then helping them actually define that. I mean, if you ask parents, what is most important to you, when it comes to your children, 85% of all parents will give you a single answer. Do you know what that answer is? What do parents want? 85% is their number one value, the number one thing they want for their children.
To be happy.
To be happy, right? So this whole quest is this right here. And now we go and we can look at science, we can look at sociology, we can look at the Bible, and we can take everything that we know about human history, right? And go, hey, what is it that produces happiness at a level more than anything else, right? And we can see from science, from sociology, and from the Bible that
jet skis.
When we get the right alignment, not lake houses or unicorns, but when we get the right alignment of time and money and purpose, it really unlocks us to live the life that God has created us and ordained us to live. Well, would it be helpful if we talked about how I'm actually walking through this with one of my own children right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's do a case study on this a little bit.
Yeah. So just a little bit about me. So, me and my family, we have some very clear values, right? We have 5 family values. One of my values is kingdom builders. As a follower of Jesus, I want to build the kingdom. Jesus prayed, Father, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So me and my family are trying to be as much a part of that as possible, right? So our church in Florida planted a church in the country of Colombia. Well, 2 years ago, my wife and 2 oldest kids went down to Colombia on a mission trip. My son met the lead pastor's daughter of our church plant, and they fell head over heels from day one. And they are currently in the process of trying to figure out how to get married. Okay. So right now I have a 19-year-old son who is in this process. And I'm like, okay, son, what do you want your life to look at? Now, this conversation has been super helpful because not only am I having it with him, but I'm also having it with her, and I'm also having it with her family because the parents are friends, and we're very aligned on this whole thing. So just recently, the other day, and their plan is they're probably going to live in Colombia. And because he's going to stay down there, he can work with a laptop lifestyle, which is one of our family values, which is I want to be able to do what I want, when I want, how I want, right? So, and even where I want. So the conversation is, okay, what do you need to support this life in Colombia? And so her dad came and he gave me this whole thing about this is what it's going to cost per month for them to live the lifestyle that they're accustomed to. So now we've asked them these questions, and they're now defining this. And they've said, hey, okay, this is where we want to live. This is the city that we want to live in. So they've chosen city over country, right? So you got to choose where you want to live. You got to choose, what do you want your house to be like? Do you want a house? Do you want an apartment? Do you want, seems to be the dream of everybody, to have 5 acres and a bunch of chickens? Do you, do you want how many cars do you want to have? Hey, what kind of vacations do you want to have? Right? What kind of giving do you want to do? What kind of school? You going to homeschool? You going to public school? You going to private school? So we're just helping them ask all of these questions, right? To show them the greater reality of what this life that they're dreaming about, which are great dreams, but what's the actual cost to live this life here? And so this is the life that they want to build in this big overarching fashion, right? And so now the question is, okay, how are you going to support that life? Because how are you going to support that life financially? And I think this is where you start with the job. And some of them are going to say doctor. Some of them are going to say dentist. Some of them are going to say, something that's very time intensive. And then you get to ask that question. Okay, that's great. You've met the financial goals, but what about time? I mean, do you want to spend time with your kids, or do you only want 10 days off a year every 52 weeks? And, my kids are really spoiled because me and my wife, we run both of our businesses from home. So we're always around. So of course they're like, well, we want to do things from home like you do, because we want to be together as a family. Well, here's what we just did. We just basically eliminated 99% of the jobs that colleges offer, right? I mean, we just completely and totally wiped all those off the board because colleges were trained on this industrial revolution mindset where you go to factory, you go to work, you exchange your time for money, and then you go home. But in the way we're asking this question, like, you might be able to do that in college, and it may be that your purpose of being a doctor and an open heart surgeon and the money you get is strong enough that you're willing to sacrifice on the time. But they've got to make value judgments of which of these are most important, but yet they've got to find a way to link all 3 of these together.
I love how you just map this out. And if you haven't been watching this on YouTube, we've been just mapping out what Daniel's saying to his son, and then putting those things into boxes, and then showing how they're supported by this time, money, and purpose framework. I'll tell you one thing, as you've been talking, Daniel, I just had somebody ask me this week. He said, what is the mission of Wealth Without Wall Street? And I said, at the end of the day, it's about impact. It's about impact, because there are people that want financial freedom, and they want it because they've been stuck, and they've been poor in their life. And they're like, well, I don't want to do that. I want to go away from that. And I said, but at the end of the day, the impact is on the other side of financial freedom. You can pursue the actual reality of life is being able to have an impact while we're here on this earth. And we specifically talk about spiritual freedom, like having that relationship with Christ being the number one priority, because there are people that will have the time and money and they don't have a purpose. They don't have it because they don't have someone else who they support. In this case, the mission of God, right? And so they're wanting to support themselves, and they wake up and they're like, hey, I have all this and it's not enough. Something is missing. Something is left out. And what you just pointed out is purpose. So critical for us to be considering that, especially with our kids. But I mean, many of you right now listening, you're chasing something. And if you don't have that purpose, and I want to challenge you right now to seek that, because you could do that simultaneous to getting your financial freedom. And so, anyways, Russ, what would you add?
Well, I don't want to contradict what you said, but I do think the purpose needs to be attached with the money and the time as well, right? Like Because I think you could be so on purpose without money and time and be resentful of those things. And we've seen people in that world. And I think it's just a good conversation. And it's, I think it's refreshing when we interview a lot of people, Daniel, as you know, on the show. We've had you on talking about the amount of success that you've experienced by creating this online brand that now that you're selling products on Amazon all over the world at like extraordinarily high levels. You've become the guru, the person that, everybody in our community looks up to. And, not only because you're taller than most of us, but also that you've been super successful in this area. But I love the fact that you've also been very passionate to teach and to be a steward of this and to share this. Thank you for coming on to have this conversation. It inspired me recently to have a conversation with a younger guy who was in his, I think, late 20s, maybe 30 years old. He's considering a job change. And I was asking him why he was considering that change. And he said, my current role has me constantly on the road. I'm constantly traveling. My wife is pregnant. And I want to be there for all the things that my parents were able to be there for me. And, I'm thinking about another opportunity. And I said, well, I just had this conversation with this guy about time, money, and purpose. Would you mind ranking those for me? How do they fit in your life today? And he's like, time is definitely most important. He said, I hate to say this, but money is number 2. And, purpose would be number 3 on the list. And I said, great. Tell me about the new opportunity you're considering. And he did. And I said, I don't hear anything about how this is going to give you more time. That's what you just ranked was number 1. It seems like it'll give you more money. Seems like maybe you align more with its purpose. But you said a second ago, time was the most important thing, and it's not aligned. And I think that was a great kind of check for him. And I think we all should do that, right? Like, what are the things that are most important to us right now? And I think those will switch potentially in life, right? Maybe purpose will go to number 1 in his life at some point, and money may go to number 3, right? But I think it's valid to always be ranking those and also keeping track of where you are in those. We had a guy on our podcast one time that challenged Joey and I. He said, you guys talk about, what you track grows and what you track and report on grows exponentially. You're tracking passive income. That's important to you. He said, what's the purpose of the passive income? We said, so it can give us more time. He said, okay, show me your tracking sheet on your time. And we're like, oh, wow.
We didn't have that.
Yeah, like that. That's a good thing, right? Like, if that is important, we should be tracking it. So anyway, Daniel, final thoughts that for someone listening, whether it's for themselves, for a kid, or something else. What else have we not touched on that we should leave them with?
My mentor has said to me on more than one occasion. He says, Daniel, there have been times in my life where I had to solve problems with money, and there's times that I've had to solve problems in life without money, and I definitely have a preference. The Bible says that the love of money is the root of all evil, but not money is the root of all evil, right? And we all have different relationships with money. But what I would encourage you to do in this whole thing is just reframe the question. What kind of life do you want to live? And start moving toward that. And it may take you 5 to 10 years to get to that life. But in reality, if you can find this balance, and if you've ever sat on a 3-legged stool, have you ever sat on a 3-legged stool?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a very difficult balancing it. And so you're always monitoring it. You're always engaging with it. You got to concentrate all the time. So if you engage in this practice, know that it's something you're going to be concentrate all the time. But yet, if you find the right balance and manage it well, I think it'll actually produce the happiness and the life that you want. So when you look back in life, or that when you see your kids go out of the nest, you can know that you've lived life well.
Well, brother, appreciate you. Thank you for coming and sharing wisdom with us. One last random quote from the internet. They say money doesn't buy happiness, but I'd rather cry in a Tesla than on a bicycle. Take that for what you will. Have an amazing day.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.